All right, everybody, we're back. Ashley Adamson here. It is Tuesday. It is happy hour presented by Dr. Pepper. Josh Issue is in the house, so you know things are going to go well. Yogi Roth about to join me live. Happy hour presented by Dr. Pepper. Yogi, how are we feeling overall? Should we go through? Let's set the stage a little bit. We've got 5 Pac-12 teams in, just like we did last week, except UW and Oregon State flop. We kind of had a feeling that whoever won that game last week was going to get in. All right, but here let's just go through. Oregon 6, they move up 2 spots. USC 8th, they move up 1 spot. UCLA, some disrespect for the Bruins, still number 12, which you think, okay, fine. But as we get into that, I think that there's a lot to be said of why the heck are the Bruins number 12. Utah's 13th, they move up a spot, and then Washington hops in at number 25 after knocking off Oregon State. All right, so where do you want to start?
Whew. I don't know, but I'll tell you what, my phone is blowing up in a good way, because I think people in the college football world, they understand what people in the Pac-12 understand, which is Oregon's playing like one of the best teams in the country. You can't ignore that. Now, we will address all of the points that were made by the crew that was just on ESPN and understand it. But where we sit today in college football and what we project in the future, the Oregon Ducks, let's just be very clear, in the Pac-12, have the most challenging path of anybody that's in consideration for the CFP. Who do they have to play? They're going to play multiple ranked teams. Oregon State, heck, they might be ranked by this thing. We'll see how it shakes out with them, but no one has that path. So I just did a little homework just because it's fun. Like, we know what Georgia is. Like, they're the number 1 team, fair, all that. They don't play a ranked team. Okay, let's talk about Ohio State. Have they even played a ranked team? Oh, yeah, one the entire season, and then they'll have Michigan at the end of the year. Michigan, give them props for the Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn wins to kick off the season. They'll play Illinois, who didn't look good over the weekend, and Ohio State, of course, in the end. TCU, I'm wishing Sonny Dykes luck. I hope they win out. I really do. But this is their first ranked team in a while. But they've done a nice job against ranked teams. They had 4 straight wins. Then they had Baylor, Iowa State. Tennessee, I can't believe we're having the discussion, but we'll have it. My point is that, like, as you go down the list, even LSU, you look at their schedule, and no disrespect to UAB, but they didn't even have football a couple years ago, right? Like, so I just think that not even like trying to be snarky, just to be straight up. And Reese, I love you, brother. Like, he's a great dude, but you can't ignore what they have to go do. And I think if they're able to handle business, Ash, and what is in front of them, they're going to be one of the top 4 teams. Disappointing, Tennessee was ranked higher than them, 1,000%. 1,000%. You can comp the 2 losses, bunch of statistical categories. Oregon's better than them. More rushing yards, more total yards. I get that they both lost in a dramatic manner, and the score for the Oregon one was greater than the Tennessee one. But we're talking about week 10 in year 2 for Josh Heupel. We're talking about week 1 in year 1 with QB1 and Dan Lanning and Bo Nix. Like, I just think the context, I'd imagine, was brought into the room. I think Boo Corrigan said that. So, Duck fans, I'm with you. I'm a little frustrated too, but I think you're sitting in a good spot if you're able to win out.
Well, and just in case anybody missed it, and Oregon fans in here, certainly, Boo Corrigan, the committee chair, Reese Davis asked him point blank, how does the committee evaluate that 46-point loss in week 1? And I literally wrote down what he said, because I think it's important and it should make Duck fans feel good. He said it's part of what we talk about, but they've won 8 consecutive games averaging over 40 points per game, beating UCLA, who is well respected by the committee. He made sure to get that in there. I think they should have been a little more respected, but we'll get to that. It's not about what game, it's what they've done throughout the season. And he said, so we're looking at everything combined, strength of schedule being one of the components, how they play as a team, how they play together is what we're looking at overall, and they have been impressive. So I appreciated that response to Reese's question, because it's clear how Reese feels about that 46-point loss in week 1 and how that should impact things. But let's talk about UCLA, because, again, Boo Corrigan, the committee chair, says, yes, we respect UCLA. How are they at 12? How do they stay the same?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, probably Taylor Jane just commented they should be higher than USC. And I'd agree. When you take into consideration, I mean, a big part of the committee, we've done the mock committee selection, and they live in like 1-week windows, right? So I'd imagine the Zach Charbonnet injury, and not sure what's going to move forward with him. I think he's best running back in America. I really do. Now, he's missed a couple games this year. Like, he's not going to be in the Heisman discussion, but I think he's going to be the first running back, or at least an early running back taken in the draft. To that point, I also look at SC and I say, well, Jordan Addison, Mario Williams, Eric Gentry, they didn't go either. right? So it's an interesting one. You go back and you watch those two games, they're kind of mirror images of one another, right? Like both of them had a chance to put away Cal or Arizona State this past weekend. Neither did. They both hung around. They kept us up. Maybe they kept people on the East Coast up a little late as well. We hope you did. But I was surprised by that, because here's the reality. When we look at the teams ahead of them, take Ole Miss out of the conversation. But if you look at Alabama and Clemson, they're completely out of the CFP, as I think how we would digest that. So I was surprised to see UCLA sit at 12 with a legit Heisman candidate. Whatever odds you're looking at, DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, is in a top 10 conversation. They have the star power. They have chip. They improved defense. I think it's noteworthy their defensive coordinator missed the last 2 games due to health. Like, I was shocked. But again, they'll have their moment in the sun against a top 10, now 8 USC. I imagine USC will hold serve this weekend against Colorado on Friday night.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned Alabama and Clemson. First time in the history of the CFP rankings that neither of them is in the top 6, which is pretty remarkable.
Eaters, right? Here's the thing that I thought was really interesting. Like, Notre Dame was a big topic of conversation, right? Stanford, right? Like, we heard the conference, at least Reese, again, his words, the Pac-12, who have they played? Well, Stanford beat Notre Dame. Period. End of story. Cal, I think we all would argue, or wouldn't even argue, like, there was a missed call in that game. Maybe that flips the game. But my point is, like, in the Stanford game, Ohio State was a challenging game. Excuse me, Notre Dame. Notre Dame was a challenging game to kick off the season. It wasn't like as though Ohio State put it on them. So I think, to his point, I thought that was interesting, because if you're going to start to comp games and teams, UCLA rolled Stanford. Stanford eliminated Notre Dame. Notre Dame couldn't do anything against the Stanford defense. They just gave up 50+ against Washington State. So I do think it's important to call it out of, like, if we're going to comp that and use, we don't know if the committee is, but if we're using the Notre Dame thing, you start to comp comparable wins, then I think you have to look at, like, how that ball bounces, especially with UCLA, and then SC will have their moment against Notre Dame as well.
Well, and as Wizard of Miraz points out in the comments, you also, if you're going to talk about Notre Dame, you're putting a 6-3 Notre Dame team 20th. They've lost to Marshall and, as you mentioned, Stanford. The Huskies are 5 spots lower than that. You know, like, it's so just there's.
Well, I would say, like, the team that got hosed tonight, it wasn't necessarily UCLA. I mean, I thought Oregon State could have stayed. Like, if you watch the game,
yeah.
All right. Like, I heard people talking about, like, inclement weather in certain games. Ohio State inclement weather. Well, Bo Nix, Heisman candidate Bo Nix, the winds at Colorado are over 30 miles an hour there too, right? Yeah. The winds in Husky Stadium, where it howls there probably more than anybody in America off the lake, was howling there too. That game, I just watched it. I'm calling Oregon State this weekend. They're moving the ball up and down the field. The chance to be up 21-7.5. They drop, it would have been a pick 6 by Alex Austin in the final 2 plays of the first half. To me, they should still be ranked, to what the Wizard of Miraz said around Notre Dame. Like, I really believe that. So I would imagine they're on the outside, sitting pretty close to being in. If they're able to beat Cal, right, and if Notre Dame is valued and the Cal-Notre Dame game was tight, and then Cal can beat Stanford, maybe, like I think that this is the time, if we're going to start connecting dots, it's important to do so versus just which big brand looked like we hoped they looked, which was Notre Dame. They were, what, a top 5 team to start the season, top 10 team?
Yeah. And
have been rolled in those reference games.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that we always try and do is put in context. Okay, so this is the second CFP poll, right? Like, December 4th, that's the rankings that matter. And there's a lot that's going to happen between now and then. We saw it on Saturday. We saw the chaos, that ensued. We knew that there was going to be a mix up when Alabama, Tennessee, and Clemson all lost. So there will be more things that happen throughout the last 3 weeks of the regular season. But for Oregon, their path, USC, their path, UCLA, those are the 3 teams. And there's Utah fans that are thinking, well, is there any way that for the first time ever you get a 2-loss team into the CFP? But when you look at the Pac-12 and those 3 teams, especially at the top, in your heart, Yokes, who do you believe has the best shot at getting there?
Well, yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing. Like, to your point, last week it was like the national narrative seemed to be, and even Greg McElroy said it on the show, SC's got the cleanest path. I look at it now with the losses we had to Clemson, and by the way, anybody in America put Utah and Clemson on a neutral field. Tell me who you're going to pick. Mm-hmm. That, to me, was a joke in terms of where they netted out at 10. Well, they don't even know who their quarterback is. We know Cam Rising's healthy. A sidebar. to that point, I think when I look at the three teams with one loss, I don't think as though in my heart of hearts that like USC's got the cleanest path or UCLA is the cleanest path, or you're going to have a Pac-12 conference champion, right? Maybe the first ever undefeated conference champion having to beat multiple ranked teams on their way to a conference championship. There's a lot of combinations. So I don't feel as though one team has the cleanest path. I think whoever wins out, whoever wins the league, if they can finish off with one loss or no losses in conference play, you're in. Because of the ACC being out and Georgia looking like the dominant team at number one.
Okay, so let's talk about the games this weekend, Yogs, because I think obviously now you look at the rankings and we've got a top 25 showdown at a rainy Adamson Stadium. Never rains there, thankfully, but 40% showers in the forecast. This is going to be fun. Just two phenomenal quarterbacks. There's so many things to talk about. I think it's probably worth mentioning Dan Lanning's name getting thrown in the mix for the Auburn job, rumored for the Auburn job, which he shot down in the most beautiful way yesterday at his press availability. But give me your thoughts, early thoughts on that game and everything kind of swirling around what that game means.
I think it's huge. Let's just talk about the rivalry. Everybody on this chat knows exactly what it is. These two first-year head coaches know what it is. They've educated themselves, their teams. Like, I just love that element this late in the season and the game meaning so much. I think you have two teams that are really confident because of the two men you referenced, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., two guys that showed up in this conference, you know, via the portal. Obviously, this is their lone year in this rivalry game. Both playing at ridiculously high levels and both really confident. And I think the alphas on the team. Guys are following their lead on a bunch of levels. I think they got two of the best offensive lines that believe they can run the ball. And I think that's going to be a big part to your point on the weather in this game. I think you have two of the hottest coordinators in Ryan Grubb and Kenny Dillingham offensively in the country.
Oh, yeah.
The creativity, when you study these teams as we do, it's so fun in terms of how they set each other up.
I mean, was Kenny Dillingham not having like the time of his life last weekend? Like, I'm like, what?
Totally. And then the eyes of the country is going to be on the game, right?
Yeah.
I think for years we sit here on these, you know, shows at the Pac-12 networks. We're fighting for respectability. We're begging people to just watch, see the players, because the NFL does every year. It's third most players drafted coming out of the Pac, behind the SEC and Big Ten, who have two more teams, FYI, right? Like, so I just think that this is a cool moment with Pac-12 title implications, CFP implications. And we're talking about Oregon at the top, in terms of the team I believe in most. And then UW, who was in that dialogue. They throttled Michigan State. Quite a nice win over the weekend. They're playing better football. So I think all those things come into consideration. And I say that because whoever wins, it'll be a gritty win. And if you think it's an ugly win, then take your butt back to the South or wherever you're watching football, because it's not reality. When you look at the players, this is the best edge. This is the best front seven in terms of edge rushers in the league at UW.
Yeah.
Braylon Trice, all conference level, right? They've got 3 or 4 defensive ends that will make life challenging. Two of the best tackles in the Pac-12 for Oregon. You got the best center in the Pac-12 and Alex Forsythe. Yeah, like I just think it's a lot of best on best. And then you get to the outside and you look at Christian Gonzalez. He might be the best player in the league. He might be a first-round pick at corner. Going up against Ramadunzie, the two Jalen's, like, it is going to be a hell of a game. And I think that needs to be all of our mindsets going in. It'll be a bloodbath. It'll be ugly. It'll be pretty. It'll be beautiful. It'll be electric. Like, it'll be all the things. And I think we should appreciate it for that once we get to an outcome Saturday night.
Amen to all of that. And thanks to you guys who are just joining us. This is Happy Hour presented by Dr. Pepper, Yogi Roth, Ashley Adamson, breaking down the second CFP ranking that just came out by the committee and talking about the games coming up this weekend. So drop your thoughts, your questions, anything for Yogs before we sign off on this thing. I do want to say, I think it was Michael J. Wilson or somebody named Michael said, put Bo Nix in the Heisman conversation. Yes, he is there. So is Caleb Williams. So is DTR. And I think that when you look, I mean, if we were going to do some blind resumes and just look at the numbers that those three young men have put up and the way that they do it, I don't know that there's a quarterback that I enjoy watching more than Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I mean, he just, every time the ball is in his hands, it just feels electric. And you could say the same thing about the other two as well. I got to see Caleb Williams in person for the first time at USC on Saturday night, and he's just special. Like, he's down his two top receivers. They got injuries. Their defense keeps giving up touchdowns to Cal, and he just goes out there, and it is like he's just smooth as butter. So I think all those guys are in the Heisman conversation. Any thoughts with your Heisman vote coming up?
Yeah, well, I think that, like, to me, it's in the entirety of the season, right? And that's where Bo Nix has been really impressive. You know, first game of the season, we all know what that was. Since that moment, he's playing at an insane level. Like, his comfort in this offense. Caleb Williams, if you take one guy, you're like, all right, let me ride with one dude in America, I'd take him, right? And DTR, you talk about mastery of a system, it's off the charts impressive, right? And then to do it without, his, Superman, Batman, whatever, like, didn't have Zach Charbonnet in the backfield. He's really comfortable putting his team on his back. And that's what I love about all those guys. I mean, those three embrace the impact they have. They embrace the role they have. They want and seek out the bright lights, which is the next 3 weeks. Like, it really is. And it's interesting. There was a question on there of how come UCLA isn't higher than SC? It's a fair question. Now, one might say, well, look at the preseason or look at the non-cons. Rice is playing well. Fresno State is playing better than people thought after the injury to Jake Haener, right? Like, UCLA's non-cons weren't that impressive. Now, I immediately come back and say, well, neither are Michigan's, right? Neither are a lot of teams that are ranked high. But I think when it comes to the one-loss thing, like, don't worry about it for Bruin fans. If you're able to beat SC at home, like, obviously you'll jump them and you'll put yourself in an incredible position to do something that has never been done before at UCLA. And I think it's a reality. Like, they're a really complete team. They got to shore up some things defensively. But from a Heisman standpoint, all three of those guys are in the mix. And honestly, Stetson Bennett is the other guy in the mix.
Yeah.
Like, I think we got to stop labeling him. It's a lazy narrative, just a former walk-on. Like,
Totally.
Dude carved up Tennessee. Sorry, Vols, but you got rolled in that one over the weekend.
Yeah, he's an easy guy to cheer for. I'm not going to lie. I like Stetson Bennett, even with all my Pac-12 biases.
Yeah, same.
Okay, so I saw there's some people that are upset that we haven't mentioned Utah. We have mentioned Utah. You can go back and watch at the beginning. But let's talk a little about Utah before we go. So Senior Day, and Cam Rising is going to take part in Senior Day festivities, we saw. And he said he's going to be doing – I imagine he's going to be playing. I think there was some question marks about what is his health? Is he good to go? But if potentially this is his last, and he still has another year of eligibility, but if this is his last game at Rice-Eccles, he's going to be doing everything. They're going to have to hold him back and like chain him up in the locker room for him not to play, I'd imagine. But Utah's got Stanford at 7:00 this weekend. What do you make of where the Utes are right now? Because I don't know that any team, I mean, there's a lot of teams that have had really significant injuries, but you look at what they've been able to overcome and still be in a really good spot and have a legitimate shot. They don't control their own destiny, but have a very legitimate shot and path to the championship game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they might be playing the best defense in the league right now, and they lost Van Fillinger for the season. The linebackers of Karene Reed, Mo Diabate, Landon Barton, we were there over the weekend, had their game. Look at the edge guys up front. You look at Jonah Ellis. I mean, he's all conference player. Inside, Junior Tafuna, the best D tackle in the league. Clark Phillips, we know what he is. Back end's playing with Cole Bishop, Guy Haberman's favorite player. He's all over the place. I love where this team's at. This weekend, I'm actually really intrigued in their game. Stanford coming off a really bad loss. They had a really bad loss last year against Utah. What are they like in this game? Yeah. And for the Utes, if it's me, the recipe against Arizona was perfect for this weekend. Just run the ball. Not with Cam Rising, right? Like, he wasn't, and Kyle said this after the game, like, Cam wasn't 100%. Calling it, you can kind of tell. He missed some throws that he always makes. Yes, it was raining, but it wasn't crazy windy. Like, I think he was 77% accuracy coming into the game, something like that. And he wasn't that in the game over the weekend. Get him back on track. Devon Vele, get him going again. And then get Dalton Kincaid healthy. Like, I know he wants to play too. Like, this is his 52nd game in college football if he plays. Think about that. Well, you know what, Dalton? I love that for you. I want you to play if you're healthy. But if it ain't right, just kick on back.
Yeah.
And get your team ready for that game, which we know is coming up in Adamson. And it's setting up to be, an epic weekend on the 19th of this month.
There's no question about it. And there was a comment in here that somebody asked, what if UCLA, Utah, and Oregon are tied? Who goes?
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier, you did a deep dive, and you have a clearer understanding of it than I do. So they all finish 8-1. What happens?
Yeah, so you can check this out on Pac-12, pac-12.com. Just go to the standings page, and it has the 3-team tiebreaker or the 2-team tiebreaker. To keep it really basic now, because there's so much that will go into this. If those three are tied, you start to work your way down the tiebreakers, and you get to a level which is the fourth step, because everything else is just kind of crosses each other out. Get to the fourth step, and it's gonna be, or it may be, the teams that advance to Las Vegas, the teams they played will have the top winning percentage in conference games. So Washington State might have a huge impact on who goes to Vegas based on who wins the game. So all these games that will end up at the end of the season that you're like, oh, well, it's a 4-team race, or then it's a 2-team race, or whatever you may think it is, it's not that.
They all matter.
They all actually matter. It's crazy when you actually kind of break it down and try to do all the numbers. And we've all seen all the things online of like, well, this team wins and this team. I've seen so many different flow charts. Bottom line, like, relax. Don't put yourself through that stress, because we've all gone through it. Like, I've got my pieces of paper that are sketched out too, Ash. But ultimately, if those three teams are tied, you're going to start working your way down the tiebreaker list. And it may come down to the winning percentage of conference teams that you've played. So who's had the stronger schedule?
Wild.
What's the strength of record based on your opponents? And I hope we don't get there. I don't think anybody does, but we'll see.
It's great comments today. Good stuff, people.
Thanks for coming.
You guys are doing your part. Hope everybody voted. Hope everybody enjoys a good night's sleep. Yes, I like that. I have 2 stickers. They're downstairs. My children are wearing both of them. But good stuff by you, Yokes, as always. And we'll do this again next week. And please hit us up on Twitter with any questions, or Instagram. And that's all we got.
Peace.